Hey, and welcome to a special episode of the BlueScreen Brothers, preparing for what is up and coming of the Microsoft MVP Summit. With me today, I have my fellow Norwegian MVP, Julian Rasmussen. Hello, Julian.
Hello, Alex. How are you today?
Hello. Well, it's getting late. It's past bedtime for my daughter, but I'm still kind of getting there. I'm using clipper hangers to keep my eyelids up. But with us, we have someone who's just done with lunch. I think we have a VIP here directly from Microsoft. So why don't you take and introduce yourself there, Jason?
Thanks, Alex and Julian. So I'm Jason Parker. I'm talking to you from sunny Phoenix, Arizona, in the U.S. And this week we're gonna hit probably 40 degrees centigrade. So it's gonna get pretty warm. It's actually my favorite time of year, but I'm a senior product manager in what we call the Windows Cloud and Experience team. We cover all of AVD, Windows 365, and some of the virtual reality, like augmented reality feature sets. So primarily I focus on FSLogix. So if you're familiar with profile roaming, and then I am also the product manager for the new feature from Ignite called User Experience Sync, which brings a similar functionality to Windows 365 in frontline shared mode.
I'm sorry, did you get anything of what he said, Julian? Because I lost him when he said sunny Arizona with the emphasis on sunny at 40 degrees centigrade. Did you
Yeah,
get anything after that?
I was just thinking about palm trees and nice sunny beaches and yeah.
Yeah,
Think of suntans and swimming pools.
we just came out of this weekend on the west coast of Norway with two hurricanes, one on Thursday and one on Sunday. So it's all right. I'm gonna put some lotion on and recover from that burn. But thanks, Jason. That was a good intro. There was a lot of three letters acronyms here. It's just like AVD, Windows 365, VR, augmented. It's a lot of stuff here. But give us a brief thing. If I'm not mistaken, you kind of classified it into three steps, like VDI, Cloud VDI, Cloud PC. What are they, and what's the distinct difference between them?
So when we talk about VDI, that's primarily what you think of in your traditional virtual desktop environment where you've got either RDS servers running in a farm, or you're running Citrix servers or VMware Omnissa. It's your typical on-premises infrastructure. And when we think about moving from on-prem, just like we did back in the 2010s, everyone was going from on-prem into the cloud. We're still kind of on this journey within VDI and saying, well, VDI does evolve into what we call cloud VDI, which is leveraging the cloud, which would be in the Microsoft ecosystem, Azure, right? And within Azure, we have Azure Virtual Desktop, which is AVD, and that is what we consider to be cloud VDI. So you're putting most of your infrastructure in cloud resources for your being able to expand on demand and have elasticity, more automation. So kind of like freeing up some of your on-prem data center space so you can put things more into the cloud, consumption-based model. And then the next evolution is, well, maybe I'm not a really smart infrastructure admin. Maybe I didn't spend my career learning about servers and how to set up networks and all the different licensing models. I just need to set up remote work for my employees. Cloud PC is really the next evolution of saying you don't need to be super smart in infrastructure. Microsoft is going to handle all the smart things, all the hard things for you. I wouldn't say smart things, but all the hard things, right? Of like, you don't have to set up the servers. You don't have to know all the difficult, complex tasks. And the Cloud PC will kind of be your software as a service solution, kind of all in one box.
So it's like a three-step booster. You got your data center, your pet server, and then you kind of remove your pet server, but you still get to kind of tweak all the stuff. And let's realize it's always the DNS that's the problem. and
It's always
and
the
then,
network, unless it's the network guy working on it.
yeah, and then finally, it's just like software as a service. You just purchase something out of a box, and it just works.
Yep.
And And you mentioned you got something fresh out of Ignite. Was this user experience sync? That sounds to me like FSLogix.
It does sound like FSLogix, but think of a complete overhaul, fresh iteration of what FSLogix could be if it was a software as a service.
Oh, so he walks like a duck, talks like a duck, but it is not a duck.
It is not a duck.
We've heard and we've seen FSLogix was acquired by Microsoft a few years ago, right? And you sound smarter than me. What is FSLogix for those who really? It's like this profile roaming. You have a pool of servers, and then you just attach a user profile on top. That's almost sounds like Lego explained. But what's the magic?
I think at the end of the day, when you think of the word profile, it's really about user experience, right? And at the end of the day, you want your end users to be able to sign on to a compute environment, and their experience should be as repeatable and customized to their expectations the moment that they sign in. And so the way that we do that in the FSLogix world is that we capture literally everything about their experience, and again, we can use the term profile and experience interchangeably. Capture everything about their experience. We store that into a VHD container that gets stored on the network somewhere. And that VHD container follows the user for every computer that they sign into. And when we say computer, we really just mean a virtual desktop, some compute somewhere residing on a server somewhere else. And that's really where VDI shines, right? Is I have a bunch of resources, and I don't want a user to be assigned to a dedicated resource. I want the user to be able to use a resource as it's available or as they need it. So, the whole idea of their experience following them is really kind of what matters, right? Because at the end of the day, when you walk into your office, if you had to walk in even your home office and you're like, okay, I have to unbox everything and, for all of my computer setup and plug in all the cables, it's not a great way to start your day.
I like the Batman analogy here. It sounds like Batman. It's like you get the same. You're the same guy driving all these awesome resources, but when you try to save some cost and cut some cost, you can drive a cheaper car.
Yeah.
So you can scale up and scale down hardware, but you get the same user experience, and it's the same interface. So nice.
Yeah.
Julian, you're the identity guy here. So the identity user profile. I hear something connecting here.
Yeah, of course. But what I'm thinking about here is how do we balance the need of extremely simple access for the frontline workers with the requirements for strong identity and access security that we especially need in environments where you have a high turnover or shared devices and things like that? Do you have a take on that?
Give me a little bit more about that shared experience, like the secure identity.
Yeah, I was thinking about you have like a pool of AVD hosts, and you have a shared device, but you still need a strong identity and access security for end users to sign in. But you then need also to focus that we still need the extreme simple access for the frontline workers as well. So they need to have a simple way of accessing the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think and that's part of the simplicity of Windows 365. So Frontline Worker, we developed the Frontline license, which started as primarily a dedicated mode where one license would give you access to 3 Cloud PCs, where a user is assigned to those Cloud PCs, and that didn't really fit a model where a user doesn't need a dedicated PC. They just need to be able to perform a task intermittently, whether it's a doctor, a nurse, a railroad operator, a bank teller, they could be any number of different personas. And so shared mode was really introduced to build that pool of devices that any user could access. But the strong authentication is really leveraging your single sign-on experience. So the user can sign on, they can leverage the Windows app or the app on any of their chosen client devices, whether it's iOS or Android. they sign on, you define kind of the security within Entra on, if you're going to do conditional access policies to limit what are the types of devices, where can they sign in from, making sure they have multi-factor authentication. So all those things, right? And originally in shared mode, every user that signed on to those pool of devices got a reset of kind of a user experience every single time. And the first thing we heard from customers was like, this pooled model is great because it's super easy for customers. It's easy for the admins to set up, but it's really hard for our end users because they have to launch an application and doesn't have all their stuff. And so while we did talk about FSLogix in this cloud VDI, now in Cloud PC for this shared model is user experience sync. And again, making it simple for the admin where you just turn it on. And when a user signs in, everything they do inside that Cloud PC session is saved. Their background, their application settings, all of their any data that they may persist on the desktop. When they sign out, we secure that in the cloud. When they sign on again, it could be any number of devices in the pool. We're going to bring that experience right back for the user.
What would you say would be the ideal device for frontline and shared Windows 365 session? We know you have the Windows 365 link. We know that there are use cases where you prefer to use bring your own device. Sure. But seen from a program manager perspective, you have this vision hat on top when you kind of create this user experience sync, when you have all these engines. So you have this visionary hat. What kind of device do they log on to their session from, and how does this look like?
I'll give you the answer in two ways. One, I think being a product manager has taught me one thing, which is that customers will always implement your products in ways that you don't expect. And so and as I've learned that, I try and set forth and we'll do previews and we'll try and figure out we're building this for a certain use case. But user experience sync was this idea of the frontline was really for only these task-based workers. And so occasional use, the doctor in a patient room, or a train engineer walking up to a kiosk, right? But as I talked to more and more customers that we released this for, they said, well, we've got a whole bunch of other scenarios like contractors and mergers and acquisitions and, a whole bunch of other scenarios in which our original thought for the product was we really want to just dumb it down into just application settings and application data. And which would have been okay if it was just these users that were using the computers intermittently. But if you've got contractors and other such that could be information workers, power users, developers, any number of different personas, it really changes things. And so I think from the ideal device, I think it just depends on we are here to adopt our solution into a way that fits where customers are trying to deploy, right? And Link doesn't fit every scenario. Bring your own device doesn't fit every scenario. There's thin clients. So to be honest, I think they're all acceptable. And, we want to make sure that we can reach the largest market with the most people.
Will we see Linux support for the Windows app? It's a trick question.
If I own that product, and I would say absolutely, Julian, we're going to do that. But unfortunately, it's not an area that I focus on. But no, I think that Linux is a very important part of the ecosystem, especially for thin clients, right? And so making sure that as that system grows, making sure that we can properly build apps that sit on all the platforms that are fulfilling customers. And I think is iOS, you think oh, who's going to use their mobile phone, right, to do a VDI? But as mobile platforms grow, you see ways that people are taking a mobile device and mirroring their screen to a monitor, adding a Bluetooth keyboard. So your phone can almost become essentially a PC without needing a PC. So you could essentially almost have at ready, the ability to log into a Windows-based environment from almost any device, which is wild to me.
You just reminisced me about my Windows Phone or docking station right now. It makes
Oh,
me
you're gonna
so
make me
sad.
very sad about Windows
Yeah,
Phone because that
yeah,
was talk about peaking too soon, right? Like, oh, we
yeah.
nailed it, but then we missed the developer app ecosystem part.
Yeah. You mentioned here, so Julian kind of opened the Pandora's box. First, he asked about security and how to make users sign in as secure as possible, and then he says, "Well, let's go Linux and make everything weird." um,
Sorry for that.
but I think you had one of those use cases where you kind of Jason put on a hat and you figure out that, well, let's use that hat to pull a bunny out of it because you've been using Windows 365 for those scenarios, Julia.
Yeah, we have actually. So we had while in the Corona time, we had a shortage of PCs actually. So we were acquiring a company, getting 170 new developers into our organization, and we're missing hardware. So what we did then, we spun up Windows 365 for all those 175 developers and had them over in our systems in like 1.5 week. That was from we were setting it up like, okay, we're going for Windows 365. 3 days later, we have 170 developers onboarded. So the use case of actually using Windows 365 for a great start for Cloud PCs, you're getting so super quick from nothing to 100%. That it's invaluable actually. So
I'm gonna counter that with Sean C. Larson from the Surface team and see if we can spin up 175 surfaces in less than 3 days. So I'm gonna see if we can do that.
It's probably possible, but our vendors couldn't hand over the Lenovo machines at least. But
Yeah, I mean that was the time.
Yeah, that was the time. I also had a use case by my colleague that's sitting right behind me. Actually, he's working in analytics from day to day and was on vacation. Got his device stolen, and he ran into the next Apple store and bought an iPad. And he has been working for 4 weeks now on his iPad, only using a Cloud PC, and he's working in Power BI, SQL servers, and all kind of stuff daily, and primarily on his iPad now.
Yeah, I mean that really is the beauty. Is like, I think if you look at across the world, people have some sort of device. Like having a computer is not as ubiquitous as it used to be, in the late 90s. Now, having some sort of device and phones are, how many more times powerful than they were 20 years ago now that they can be able to run these systems to get you access to, and again, it's the access to your corporate infrastructure, which is the key, right? Because that's where you're doing your work. That's the access that you need, and trying to do all the complicated things like, oh, I got to get on VPN and I got to make sure I have all the right malware and antivirus definitions, and is it the right spec, and all those, is it up to date with all the Windows updates? So yeah.
Well, just prior to starting this podcast, Julian pinged me a kind of discreet message, just like, dude, Jason, is he going to know what's going on with FSLogix? It seems like it's not going anywhere. But it feels like, is FSLogix going anywhere?
That is a question that I see all the time, and I get it from customers. And the reality is FSLogix again was acquired by Microsoft, and in order to bring about a product like we talked about, looks like a duck, talks like a duck, but it's not a duck, which is user experience sync. In order to develop that product, which we actually did in less than 8 months, we brought a product from literally nothing to general availability in 8 months. It was a decision on prioritization, right? We said, we think that this is going to be a game changer in the market. How do we do that the fastest way possible? And so we leveraged resources from the FSLogix team in order to build that product. And so we made a strategic choice to say, you know what, we're betting on Windows 365. We're going to divert some resources, and FSLogix, we're going to make sure that if there's a problem, we're going to fix it. If there's a bug, we're going to handle it. If there's something that we need, we're going to do those things. But during this time that we're iterating on user experience sync, you may see less feature development out of FSLogix. But that doesn't mean that we're not invested in it, because we know that there's hundreds of millions of seats still in on-premises VDI, right? And still people moving into cloud VDI. So it's an important investment that, and as we develop user experience sync, that's going to further tell the story of what can user experience be on a Windows device when it's anywhere, right? And, so who knows where the future goes for cloud VDI, even on-prem VDI, when you can have your user experience that could be on any device that you use from any pool, from anywhere.
From what you're saying, it sounds like a smart move to have all the developers learn what not to implement in FSLogix, because now they've done all the kind of bugs and weird stuff into user experience sync. So we're going to see a very smooth implementation in FSLogix soon.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal.
Would you say that eventually, and now I'm just talking into my tinfoil hat here, but eventually, would it be possible to have one user profile roaming from my physical Windows surface to my VDI, to my cloud VDI, where that user profile is going to get synced some way?
That is the vision. Right. And so you can't build a product like user experience sync or FSLogix without having a visionary idea. Right. And sometimes those visionary ideas don't always come true. You find small ways to implement them. Right. Like if we set out last year and said, we're going to build a profile roaming solution that's going to solve on-prem devices, cloud VDI, regular VDI, and Windows 365. And it's going to take us 6 years to do it. I mean, that's not going to be advantageous for us, right? So we decided to build what we thought is going to be the great starter of what we believe to be a visionary product of delivering user experience across a wide variety of platforms. And so starting small gives us all the lessons that we want to learn and be able to scale beyond that.
That sounds like a promising North Star to navigate from. Julian, any final questions? Now I think this is probably the smartest guy on AVD we're going to get anytime soon. So any final questions here, Julian?
Hold on, I'm making my wife in here, make sure she hears how smart I am.
That kind of reminds me of this chestnut. You heard about that. If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it fall? And that's
exactly.
the same. If Jason speaks his mind and his wife doesn't hear it, did it ever happen? So is he still wrong? Is he still wrong if she didn't hear him? So right.
Well, say I have one final question within the governance specter. So. Which kind of governance mechanisms do you think organizations underestimate when they are deploying shared device setups or cloud apps, in that mean to frontline teams, or are they approaching to reducing shadow IT and misconfiguration? So what's the biggest governance gap that we see out in the wild?
Governance can be really tricky, especially across a worldwide ecosystem, right? Like things that affect the European Union affect the US differently versus things that are in Asia, right? And so I think, from a governance standpoint, we try and do things where, especially when we build products, is like before you even get a product to even in an early preview there's an enormous number of privacy and security reviews you have to go through to make sure, are you hitting any gotchas from a governance standpoint to make sure that you're not having data accessible in places that it shouldn't be. And so for user experience sync, we make sure that, hey, when your data is residing in a particular region of the EU, that it stays in that region, and that only through admins making choices or customers making choices, and that data then gets, eventually could be portable to another place. Along those lines, we initially built our product. We built it along the lines of things that we knew that we could implement, like Microsoft managed keys of encryption on the not only the OS but also the user experience sync storage. That doesn't meet every customer's demand. Some of them need the ability to have customer managed keys because of these regulatory requirements. And so we're working hard to bring those scenarios about. So we've been actively working on customer managed keys, and that's going to be something that we're going to deliver here pretty shortly for the user experience sync model. So if you've got customer managed keys and you need that for regulation purposes, you can implement that.
I just heard Jason invite himself for a second podcast after MVP Summit.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Sounds like it. So,
or maybe a guest speaker at Workplace Ninja.
A guest speaker at Workplace Ninja. Do we know anyone at the committee of Workplace Ninja here, Julian?
Maybe in Norway at least.
All right. I think we're going to round up there. It's been really interesting, and it's been really fun to understand the difference between a duck that walks like a duck, talks like a duck, but it's not a duck. And it's also very fascinating to see how you managed to build a completely new module in Windows 365 in 8 months. So thank you so much for your time, Jason. Thank you so much for sharing. And if there's anyone watching into our podcast, have any questions for Jason, we're going to see if we can relay those so we can give you the best second episode if he dares to return to our show.
Well, thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Julian. And, again, you guys can relay those questions, or you can find me on LinkedIn, or I'm always happy to engage with customers and fans.
Thank you so much. Bye.